I was playing through Korogashi Pasuru Katamari Damacy when something caught me by surprise.
Miku? Huh?
The ending theme, which is normally sung by Shigeru Matsuzaki on the PlayStation 2 game Katamari Damacy, was covered by none other than Hatsune Miku. With the release of both popular Vocaloid software and the record-setting Nintendo DS in 2004, the two were destined to meet in some way. Games like Style Savvy, Taiko no Tatsujin, and 13 Sai no Hello Work DS feature songs sung by various Vocaloid performers. Vocaloid uses a set of phonetic sounds,
and so on.
Each sound is pre-recorded and can be pitched or placed at different points to synthesize a voice.
Thank you so much for playing my game.
It's a bit more extensive compared to a standard sound bank, as there are tons of quote-unquote instruments that represent each sound. Of course, this is simplified in the editor. Digital instruments, or sound banks, can contain multiple pre-recorded samples that are spread across a keyboard. Even if there isn't a sample available for every key, the software can pitch the source sample to the other keys. By using multiple samples for one instrument, it can sound more natural than purely pitching in software. The Nintendo DS uses this sampled format for a majority of its music. On DS, KK Slider has a synthetic voice, similar to Vocaloid, but only a handful of sound bank instruments. KK Slider has around 11 instruments available with 20 samples, between vocals and his guitar. Hatsune Miku V3 in English form has 52 phonetic instruments across 2,641 samples for her original vocals. And that doesn't even account for append voice banks, which have their own set of samples and add more variance to her voice. It would be quite the effort to bring Vocaloid to the sequenced format that the DS normally uses. Animal Crossing Wild World does have the Animalese speech system that's based off of phonetic sounds, but the hundreds of samples spread across multiple voice types are dwarfed by Miku's one voice. Even including the many sound effects of Wild World, it barely passes half the amount of samples that Miku gets. Dialogue in Animal Crossing is a core feature of the game, so there's a reason why such a complex sampling system exists. For these other games, it'd be very tedious to port over an entire Vocaloid for a handful of songs. Tomodachi Collection is another good example with its synthesized voices. But again, dialogue is a core feature. With Katamari, not only does Miku appear for one song, but there's also a DSiWare file size limitation of 16 megabytes. What are the developers to do? Instead of being synthesized on DS hardware, these games featuring Vocaloid songs opt for a streamed format. Music streaming involves a file containing a pre-recorded song. This involves no instruments or sequencing. The file is streamed in as the tracker advances through the audio. All the data for the song is contained in one big file. Instead of the DS doing the work to make a live performance, it plays back a recording of a performance that was already created on another computer. That way, there's no need for an entire Vocaloid voice bank to be ported to the DS. Streaming might seem like an easy solution, but there's a catch. Streamed music files take up a lot of space. A good amount of the DS library relies on the sequenced format with preset instruments because it takes up significantly less space. By defining an existing set of instruments and giving a music sheet of instructions on how to play them, it saves a lot of space. KK Slider has 70 songs in Wild World, but the 160 instrument samples take up little more than 3 megabytes. The single, streamed ending theme for Katamari takes up nearly 1 megabyte, and that's after compression was used to lower the bitrate. It was a bold choice to include this considering the file size limitations. Streamed music can be costly. That brings things to a crossroad. If streamed music takes up so much space, are the developers being lazy by not porting over Vocaloid? Well, the samples for Miku's V3 voice bank take up about 2 gigabytes. Even with decent compression, this would be completely overkill for a game that isn't entirely focused on Miku, and near impossible for DSiWare. Games could feature multiple Vocaloid performers in their songs, further complicating how much storage would be required to hold voice banks. In this context, it really is best to avoid synthesizing. Developers could freely adjust the pitch, phonetic sounds, and add background music that wouldn't normally be possible on DS through the power of file streaming. Songs would be synthesized on a PC, recorded, then compressed to play back on DS hardware. It wouldn't be until the next generation where live Vocaloid would be attempted again on Nintendo, but that's a story for another time. It's nice to see, despite the limitations, developers in the 2000s were passionate enough about Vocaloid to introduce it into their games.
Super Mario Maker, Mario Maker, Mario Maker, Mario Maker.